Hey everyone, Spicy Toast Gaming here. Hope you're having a great day. Hope this video can make it a little bit better for you. Today we're going to be doing a champion priority guide for new players. So what champions do you want to be focusing on so you can make the most progress with a brand new account? Now, if you appreciate these daily videos, a like and subscribe is greatly appreciated, and let's get into it. Now, as you can see here, I have all the champions, have almost all of the stars, and I've leveled them all up a good amount. And so we're going to be trying to give you the best starter champions. So champions that can be good at 3, maybe 4 stars that can try to clear most, if not all, of the content in the game. And we're going to be recommending builds for all of the champions we recommend. And those builds are primarily just going to be rare relic only builds. This is just trying to be very approachable, so as a new player you can try to start focusing on these champions and using them to clear all the content in the game so you can get the most rewards as fast as possible and just level up your entire account as fast as possible. Now, the reason this guide is going to be so important for new players is that the primary way you're able to upgrade your account is going through all of these different adventures here and trying to get all the rewards. So if we go and look here at Noxus, there are several different adventures, and as you see, like here it says 8 out of 8 completed, but here for Darius it says 5 out of 8 completed. So you can see all of the different regions that it's requiring you to win with, and so this is why you want to have an account that has several different champions and at least a champion from every single region, so that whenever it gives you a region to try to complete this with, you have a champion ready to go. And by doing this, it'll just let you progress through all of these different adventures very quickly. So we're going to go region by region using the nice, very good filtering system that they just added in the last patch and tell you what champions you want to be looking for. Also, just a quick note from Editor Toast here. For these different champions, we're going to briefly describe how they play, try to kind of give you the highlights of what you need to know. And then also we're going to be giving you a rare relic build for every single champion, but we do have tons of guides, gameplay videos, build videos for every single champion in the game. So if there's any of these champions you want to learn more about, we have those resources up on the channel to help you. I didn't want to dive too much into every single champion because that would make the video even longer than it's already going to be. All right, that's it for me though. Back to the video. Now, up first, the best champion I think you should try to pick up right away, and this is going to work for both the Targon as well as Demacia. If you see right here, these are the 2 regions that we are going to be looking at first, and that's because we have Morgana right here. Morgana is a dual region champion, so she could work for Targon or Demacia, so that just gives you a lot more flexibility, and Morgana is a exceptionally good champion. Morgana's whole design is about cursing the enemies with these shackles, so this gets put in the enemy hand, and they have to spend mana in order to get rid of this. Now, this starts at just 2 mana, but the more you curse them, the higher this stacks up, and so the enemy has to either spend a large amount of mana to kind of even use their units, or they just can't use their units at all because they're immobile, meaning they cannot block or attack. So Morgana is generally the strongest control champion in the game. She's incredibly good, and if you need to just keep her at the 2 stars, that's fine. Now, moving on to your 3-star or even your 4-star, these can be very helpful, but you don't necessarily need to. I would think it would be a good idea to try to at least get her to the 3 stars if you can, but even at 2 stars, you can normally clear all the content with Morgana because she has such good control, and she is the only champion in the game that actually gets lifesteal baseline. So as the game goes on longer, you can just keep healing up, surviving, locking down the enemy, and so even with very low investment, she's able to clear all the content in the game. Now, as far as the relic build I think you want to go with, I think the first 2 is definitely Grand Shell's Counterplan and the Archangel's Staff. This way, when Morgana's on the board, you have the mana to play your spells, and with the Grand Shell's Counterplan, you are making your Dark Binding. This is very important for a couple reasons. For one, this is fast speed, stun an enemy, and curse it with shackles. So you're not only cursing with the shackles so they can't move, but if the enemy is already attacking, that stun just locks them down, because technically they could try to pay the mana to get rid of the shackles, but they can't do that with the stun. So this gives you some hard CC, but also it's further cursing them as well. And then from your starting deck, this also gets an item on it that lets you invoke, so it's able to generate more cards for you every time you play this. So it just helps make sure you don't run out of cards, gives you really good consistent control. So I think these 2 are pretty mandatory. And then the third relic is a little bit of a flex. Chemtech Duplicator can be okay. It can lead to you getting too many cards because every time you're playing your champion spell, you're then generating 2 more. But it can help you just really lock down enemy targets. Arcane Comment is another one that can be pretty good. Round start, create a fleeting falling comment in hand. So this is pretty expensive, but if you need some hard removal, so if you're going into some late game challenges where the enemy just has some really massive units, this can be good to get rid of some of those units. So this is another option for you. Or you can go for the Scourge Stash. Plunder, I cost 2 less. It can be a little bit difficult sometimes to get the plunder off, but just getting your Morgana on the board a couple rounds earlier is massive for you, especially because both of these are round start effects. So trying to get her on the board early so these can trigger earlier is very good for you. So those are some of the different relics I would try to pair, but I think these first 2 are pretty much mandatory for rare relics. You really want to use them for your Morgana. Now, next up, let's talk about Noxus. For Noxus, there's going to be a couple different champions to talk about. First up, we have Mordekaiser. As you can see, he is dual region with both the Shadow Isles and Noxus. And Mordekaiser does have a good amount of sustain, but Mordekaiser is more reliant on getting epic relics, and that's really where he shines. So without epic relics, which is not really what we're considering, you probably don't want to go for Mordekaiser. Now, if you did have some epic relics, such as like Starforged and Disciple of Shadows, then Mordekaiser would be a decent one to pick up because he works so well with those 2 relics. But since this is a guide focused on newer players, you're probably not going to have those. So even though he's dual region, you probably don't want to go for him. Now, for Noxus, all the champions are actually pretty strong. So if you already have a decent amount invested in one of them, it's not terrible. You can try to focus on them. But if you're a brand new player just looking at what champion you should really try to go for, I would suggest going for Swain. He is exceptionally good, very strong. He has a lot of control, a lot of damage, good scaling. He kind of has everything, and he's a ton of fun to play. Now, while just having his first 3 star powers is strong, I would actually recommend trying to invest a little bit further to get his 4th star and a specific node. So if we look at the constellation right here, you can see you have your first 3 star powers, and then if you move up, you get this Nexus Health and Gold, you get this 4 star, and then right here, this is massive. Spells you acquire in the adventure have Pyromantic Wake, deal 3 to the enemy Nexus. At this point, if you can get here, your Swain is incredibly good and can pretty much dominate anything in the game. Now, this is a little bit more investment than some of the other champions, but if you can get to this point, Swain is going to be incredibly good. And Swain's a champion that he's honestly great the entire time you're playing him. So you can try to get Swain early, and then while you're playing him, you'll just be starring him up. So by the time you get to those tougher challenges, you might already be able to get to this point. Now, the reason this Pyromantic Wake is so good is how it works with your 3 star. So your 3 star, your first 3 spells or skills each round deal 1 extra damage for each 5 health the enemy Nexus is missing. So the lower health they are, the more damage your spells do. Now, for Pyromantic Wake, since this goes on your spells, this damage also increases with the spell damage. So this 3 damage can actually end up doing tons to the enemy Nexus because it's going to scale way more than just that 3 damage. So Swain is excellent. As far as a solid rare relic build, I would go for the Gatebreaker and then the double Riptide Battery. Now, the order here is important. You need this to be first because this is going to trigger your Plunder, and then your 2 Riptide Batteries will just annihilate the enemy board. Normally leveling up your Swain, and when he's leveled, you're now able to stun the enemy board very easily as you get damage down. So this just gives you a massive amount of control. So for Noxus, I would go for Swain. Again, any of the champions are pretty solid, but since I recommended Swain to try to be up to that 4 star and get that Pyromantic Wake, if you maybe don't think you're going to be able to just use any star crystals, you're not going to be able to get them past 3 stars, you could also go for LeBlanc. LeBlanc is an excellent 3-star champion, very versatile, and there's a lot of different builds you can go with her. For one, you can go for a Guardian Orb build. Echoing Spirit is nice if you have it, but it's not necessary. This just means that your LeBlanc is more likely to get hit with these epic items, but you could also just go for triple Guardian Orb, and that'd also work fine. You could also go for a build primarily stacking up Stalker's Blades, so that when you drop her, she's able to do a massive amount of damage to the enemy Nexus. Or you could go a build with Everfrost, so that when she's summoned, you're again stunning the strongest enemy. With LeBlanc, you're able to summon her a whole bunch of times from her 2nd star power. She's pretty much the strongest 2nd star power in the game. And so there's a lot of different builds you can go with. These are just some for different scenarios that could be good for you. but honestly, LeBlanc is one that's super versatile. You could definitely try a bunch of different builds with her. She's good with pretty much all types of relics. So if you're looking for a champion that's good just at the 3 stars, LeBlanc is another one that is excellent. I would still recommend Swain. He's going to be better for some of the higher end challenges, but for just 3 stars, LeBlanc is also very good. Take a look at Bilgewater now, and Bilgewater is a bit of a interesting one. For one, all the champions are pretty close in power, especially at the 3 stars, and the 2 best champions are obviously the 2 that have constellations, but they're both champions that are very good with high investment. So I don't actually recommend Misfortune or Pike for new players, because it's going to be a while likely until you actually get the resources to make them very good. Now, if you can't get them to the 4, 5, or 6 stars, then they're both fantastic champions, but they do take a bit to get there. So who I'd actually go with is Illaoi. Illaoi is very solid, really approachable, and just one of the best well-rounded champions in the game. Now, as far as your build, Crown Guard, I think, is by far the most important relic for you to have when I level up Rally. With Illaoi, she's normally able to attack, and with her effect of gaining power equal to your strongest tentacle, she is able to get a massive amount of temporary power with her attack. So she attacks, she normally levels up, which means you immediately rally, and then you can attack again. You have all this extra power from your first attack that you're then doubling with your second attack, and normally you're just able to flat out end the game with your very first attack with Illaoi on the board when you have Crown Guard Inheritance. So I think Crown Guard is the most important relic for you to be using with her, and then the other relics can be a little bit of a flex pick. The biggest thing you're looking for in one of these relic slots is making sure your tentacle can also hit the enemy nexus, and there's a couple different ways you can do that. For one, you can go for Troll King's Crown, so your allies have Overwhelm. So Illaoi has Overwhelm baseline, but this is then going to give Overwhelm to all your units, including your tentacle. You could also go for Green Glade Shadeleaf. Support, grant my supported ally elusive. So you attack with Illaoi, you put the tentacle next to her, it then gets this elusive. So as long as they don't have an elusive blocker, this is again able to go through and hit that enemy nexus. And then another option that I normally don't like, because I normally don't like killing the tentacle, but you can use Corrupted Star Fragment to again have Illaoi and have the tentacle next to her. She then eats the tentacle, gets all of its stats on herself, and that's a good way to lock them in and protect them. So if you're going into a control deck where they might have like a Frostbite or something like that that's going to reduce down your tentacle, this is a good way to save those on Illaoi, especially if you can give her like Spell Shield or something like that. But normally you want your tentacle to stay alive and keep growing, so killing it is not normally the best, but there is a place for this at times. And then the last relic, it also can be a little bit more of a flex pick, but I like to go for Blade Rack. Allies have Challenger, just to make sure all your units are getting the best trades possible. But again, the most important is just that you have the Crown Guard Inheritance. It works so well for your Illaoi, makes her super consistent and ends games very quickly. All right, that's it for Bilgewater. Let's move on and talk about Bandle. And Bandle is a bit of an interesting one because, as you can see, many of the champions here are multi-region. So investing in some of these champions can work for multiple regions. The issue is for most of the champions here, they're very good with high investment. So they're good after you get them at least to level 30 with 3 stars. But even then, some of them like Heimerdinger and Yuumi really start to shine when you get them to like 4, 5, or 6 stars. Gnar also, while he's solid at level 30 with 3 stars, you also really like to have epic relics on him. Teemo's in a pretty terrible spot now. And while Veigar is fun, he's not necessarily a champion I want to try to clear all the toughest adventures in the game with. So really, I would actually go for Vex. Now, Vex started out when she first released as honestly one of the weakest champions in the game, but they've changed somewhat how she works, and now she's actually very good. And Vex is a dual region champion. Now, similar to Swain, you kind of want to get a little bit into the constellation past the 3-star if you can, and once you get there, you should be able to clear most or all the content in the game. Now, for Vex, you have your constellation here. Right down here is your 1, 2, and 3-star. Now, what you want to do is move up this side to get to this point. So you get your Pie Toss as Charging Sigil, so extra damage. The Perilous Pastry, which gets made by the Pie Toss, gets even more damage. You get this very important node right here. This is absolutely massive. Damaging spells you acquire in adventures have Charging Sigil rank 3. So they get 4 extra damage. So as you're going through the adventure, anytime you see a spell in the shop or as an after battle reward, just anything like that, that spell is going to have this Charging Sigil on it. This gives you such good removal especially with Vex, when she's leveled, she doubles the damage of your spells and skills. So essentially, this can be giving you 8 extra damage on your spells, which is insane. And then to pair that up, we have the 4-star. When an enemy dies outside of combat, deal 4 to the enemy Nexus. So now you're using your spells to kill enemy targets, and as you're doing that, you're actually destroying the enemy Nexus as well. Now, this will take a little bit more investment than most of the other champions that we are recommending. I think it's still pretty approachable, but even at 3 stars, Vex can be pretty good. But as you're progressing your account, you might want to try to start working towards this right here, and that will dramatically improve your Vex. Now, for Vex, let's first show you how she doubles your damage. So right here, you've granted Gloom 5 different times. Now, when she levels, when an enemy gains Gloom, it gains it again. So Vex has to be on the board and leveled for this to work. But while she's on the board and leveled, the enemy's taking double damage anytime they take Gloom. And the main way you're doing that Gloom is through your spells and skills. Because for Vex 2-star, all your spells and skills, when they do damage in the form of Gloom. Also important to note that Gloom reduces that unit's stats by 1/1. So even if you don't kill a unit with your damage, you're reducing them down so they're not as much of a threat. That's the very good thing with Vex, is they kind of have Enfeebling Strike, which used to be the strongest common power in the game. They kind of have that baseline from their 2nd star power, and so you have great removal for Vex, but even if the target doesn't die, you're still making them so much weaker, and they're so much easier to deal with then. Now, as far as some rare relics build, Chemtech Duplicator is great. When you play a spell, if you have 6 or more mana gems, copy with the same targets. This is really good for helping your Vex close out games, because normally this, you have to have Vex on the board anyways. So you get Vex on the board, she's doubling your damage, your spells are going off twice, so you're just absolutely annihilating the enemy. This makes Vex a very good closing champion and absolutely dominates the late games. You just need to stall to late game potentially, which again isn't too bad to do since you're reducing down the enemy stats, and then you just annihilate them. Another relic that is very important for you is the Grand General's Counterplan. Round start, create a fleeting copy of me in hand. Now what this does is it makes essentially a fleeting copy of your champion spell. Now if Vex dies, it'll turn from your champion spell into Vex, so you then have a little bit of a safety net, so if the enemy kills your Vex, you can then play her again. It's important to have her on the board, so one, your Chemtech Duplicator is able to go off, but then also your Vex is doubling your damage. Now if you don't need to play this as Vex, you can also then be playing her champion spell, which is this Glare. So grant an enemy Gloom, so that's pretty good on its own, and a draw 1, and then you're also creating more Vex in your deck. You don't want to run out or not have Vex on your board, so that's pretty nice. But this gives you a good way to get extra draw going, gives you a good way to apply Gloom, and then when you have your Chemtech Duplicator, this is going to be going off twice. But since this is also creating a Vex in your deck, it's making sure you're not running out of cards since you're drawing card, but you're putting a card back in your deck as well. So overall, I really like the counterplan for Vex. Now you can also throw on a Ludens. All your spells and skills deal 1 extra damage. That's solid, but again, remember Vex is doubling your damage, so essentially this is actually going to give you 2 damage when Vex is leveled. Now this is good if you have that skill in your constellation where the spells and skills you acquire in adventures have 4 extra damage. Then this is pretty good because you're already trying to rely on picking up a lot of extra spells and skills through shops or after battle rewards, things like that. If you don't have that node though, you might actually want to consider going for the Loose Cannons payload. So when I'm summoned, discard your hand, then create that many Pow Pows in hand. So these Pow Pows, burst speed, deal 3 to an enemy. This is a good way to just guarantee you're going to get some removal spells with your Vex. And when you're doing this, I think it's still really important to pair it with the Duplicator and the Grand General's Counterplan, especially the Counterplan because that is going to give you some extra draw. And since you're discarding your whole hand to make that many Pow Pows, it's very easy to then run out of steam. You just run out of cards to play because you're only drawing 1 card at the start of the round. But having a Counterplan with that extra draw on it really helps mitigate that weakness. So overall, I think Vex is a great one to go with. They have really good scaling and you can use them to clear all the content in the game, especially if you get to that point in the constellation that we talked about. However, if you're not able to get that, or you don't want someone that goes past the 3 stars, you could go for Nora. Now, Nora can kind of fall off in some of the tougher end adventures, so she's not my first pick, but at just 3 stars, she's pretty much better than any of the other Bandle City champions. She's really good at 3 stars. So especially if you're having a champion you want to clear a lot of the earlier adventures with, Nora's going to be a great pickup. Now, once you get to like the 4.5, 5 stars and higher, she can fall off, which is why I wouldn't recommend her as at least your main option, but she can be good. Now for Nora, her biggest strength and also somewhat weakness is right here, your 6 sugars. When you summon a created ally, grant it 3/1. Now that is a large amount of just flat stats that can just give you a lot of damage towards the enemy. So early, this is going to be really good. But as adventures get higher and the enemy stats get bigger and bigger, this doesn't really keep up because it's just a flat amount of scaling. So this is why Nora can be really good early, but then kind of can fall off. Now she is able to make all these mysterious portals, which just generate random units for you. They start off as a 2 or 3 cost. When Nora levels, that can go to a lot higher as far as units. As you see right here, when Nora levels, your portals now summon 4, 5, 6, or 7 cost followers. So this is where you're getting somewhat your scaling, you're just getting more expensive units. But it is a very random effect of you can't guarantee when your portals are going to trigger, and when they do trigger, you can't really guarantee the units you get. So she can be a little bit consistent in the higher end challenges, but early on, Nora is very good. She kind of stomps a lot of enemy challenges. Now, as far as a quick build for Nora, some of my favorite relics on her is the Transmogulator. Support transform my supported ally into a random follower that costs 3 more. This is really good. It triggers your star powers of making that unit a created unit, so it gives them that 3/1 stat line, but then pairing it with a corrupted star fragment to then have Nora eat that unit and get all of its stats, so that Nora is becoming a very strong, powerful unit. So these two together, especially make sure they're in this order, is very strong. If you reverse the order, this one's going to go off first, so Nora's going to eat the unit, and then the Transmogulator is not going to go off. And then as far as the third option, I either like to go for Blade Rex, so all your units have Challenger, so they're all getting the best possible trades, or switching this out for the Troll King's Crown, so that all your units have Overwhelm, so they can make sure they're getting the most amount of damage down possible. So once again for Bandle, I would go for Vex, especially with that path in the constellation we mentioned, but if you just want a low investment champ that you just plan on getting to 3 stars, and especially dominate a lot of the earlier adventures, then Nora is another great pickup. All right, next up we have Freljord, and this is going to be a little bit of a interesting one. The 2 champions you're going to want to consider is Ashe or Volibear. Now, I prefer Volibear, but I will admit he is one that is better with the epic relics. So if you're able to get some epic relics, especially like Disciple of Shadows or Starforged, then Volibear is going to be the better option for you to go with, because he's just super strong, especially with these 2 epic relics. I think he's still solid without them, but without them, I might give the advantage to Ashe. Still though, I would try to maybe go look at some guides or gameplays of the 2 units and try to see who you like better. Ashe can be really kind of slow and boring, whereas Volibear can be a lot of fun because you're all about dropping these giant units and just annihilating the enemy. And with your constellation, even at just your 3 stars, it's pretty good. So when you kill a unit, you make this Sigil of the Storm. This makes it so your other Titanic allies, which is units that have 8 health or power, it makes them cost 1 less. Then when you drop a Titanic unit, it strikes the weakest enemy, which then can give you more Sigils of the Storm. If you just start dropping these massive units, you have tons of removal, and you're really good at closing out the game. So for me personally, if I had to choose between Volibear or Ashe, even at 3 stars with no epic relics, I would probably lean towards Volibear because I just find him so much more fun. But I do think he might struggle in some of the higher end challenges, whereas Ashe, since she is a control champion, could be a little bit better. But I will give you a quick build for Volibear. For one, throwing on a Luden's Tempest can be pretty good. When you play him, he plays these relentless storms, so he plays 3 of them right away when you just drop him on the board, which these do 4 damage to a unit, and then if it's dead, it deals 2 to the enemy nexus. So dropping your Luden so this does even more damage is a great way to just wipe the enemy board, kill more targets, and potentially get some more sigils going. And then when he levels, he also plays those storms when he attacks. So Luden's Tempest is actually pretty good for him, but Stalker's Blade is also solid. Now he will already get a strike off from your 2-star, but making him just get another strike off so you're potentially getting some more kills can be good. You can go for multiple Stalker's Blade, but you're going to hit a point where the enemy is just not having enough units, so you're actually just not getting the strikes off that you need. Now you could always go for a Gatebreaker. It's going to reduce your stats a little bit, but you're also going to be chunking down the enemy nexus. So that's another pretty good relic as well. Now taking a look at Ashe, I think she's probably going to be a little bit better without the epic relics, and especially in those high end challenges where control is just very strong at surviving until the point where they can actually win. And Ashe is a control-based deck, so she's probably going to be a little bit more consistent for you. Now for Ashe, she's all about frostbiting the enemy, which just reduces their power down to 0. So they're essentially no longer a threat in most cases. And so that's her form of control. Now it's not as good as like Morgana's Immobilize, so they can't attack or block, or Yasuo stuns, but it is still a decent form of controlling the enemy board. Now as far as rare relics, very similar to Morgana, I think you should definitely go with Archangel Staff and Grand General's Counterplan. This just gives you the mana so you can actually play the spell you're generating from your counterplan, and that spell is just giving you a burst speed frostbite. So this is really good for just immediately frostbiting an enemy even if they're attacking. This gives you that extra consistent control, which can be very nice, and this also gets a item on it from your starting deck that's able to buff up the strongest unit on your board. So these two I think are mandatory. Very, very good for common relics for Ashe. And then the third one is a little bit of a flex. Now for me, I like to go for the Overwhelm. because with Ashe and her 2-star, it makes it that when you kill a unit with 0 power, your unit that killed them gains 1/1 as far as stats. So you're able to attack the enemy, grab some of their units with the vulnerable you get from your 3-star, and then you're able to kill them. But with the overwhelm, you're not wasting some of your damage just hitting that unit, because without overwhelm, your unit's just going to hit their unit, and any extra damage or power your unit has is just going to be lost. With the overwhelm, you're still able to punch through and hit that enemy nexus. So I like going for this, but this is a little bit more of a flex pick, so there are other relics you could throw in here if you weren't really feeling like you need the overwhelm. All right, next up, let's talk about Ionia. Now, Ionia has some really solid champions, even ones at 3 stars, but I think the best pick is definitely going to be Yasuo. Again, he is the control champion for Ionia, and he is excellent. For him, his control is stunning the enemy, so when the unit is stunned, they can't really do anything for that round, and it's generally a much stronger form of control than just the frostbite. Now, for Yasuo, similar to Ashe, it's perfectly fine to just leave them at their 3 stars. They are a champion you can invest more in if you want, but just 3 stars is perfectly good enough for Yasuo, and you don't even need epic relics. Again, they're helpful if you're able to power up your account and get them in the future, but just leaving them at 3 stars is perfectly fine. As far as the build you want to go for, the Tempest Blade is really nice when I level up stun all enemies. When an enemy gets stunned when Yasuo is leveled, he strikes it, so this gives you really good removal, and this normally means that when he levels up, he just clears the enemy board because they all get stunned, he strikes each target, and then they all die. So Tempest Blade is very good for some consistent control for you. Another rare relic that I really like to go for Yasuo is the Grand General's Counter Plan. Again, similar to many other champions, this makes it so that if your Yasuo dies, that you now have this fleeting copy of him you can play to keep him on the board. For Yasuo, he's very important for your overall playstyle. You want to always have your Yasuo on the board if you can. But if you don't need to replay your Yasuo because he didn't die, then it's also giving you a very good card, his Steel Tempest. So this is fast speed, stun an attacking enemy, and since this is a champion spell, it's creating a copy of him in your deck. Now, this only works when the enemy is attacking, but it's a very cheap stun and can really help you in a lot of situations. This also gets a item on it that gives you draw when you play this. So it's a great way to just have some consistent stuns, good safety for your Yasuo, and overall I think it's a pretty solid relic for you to use. And for the last one, it's again pretty open for you, so you can definitely flex with this one, but normally I like to either go for the Troll King's Crown, so that if there's a couple targets you haven't been able to stun and they're able to block you, which often can happen, especially when you're attacking, this just makes sure you're not losing out any damage. Quite often for Yasuo, your games can drag on a little bit long, so the overwhelm just helps speed that up and make sure you're not losing out on any damage. But the Challenger from Blade Rack, making sure all your units are getting the best possible trade, also going to be pretty good because you can make sure one of your smaller units maybe drags an enemy aside, so your bigger units are able to get in and get that hit. All right, let's now talk about P&Z, or Piltover and Zaun. As you can see, there are quite a lot of champions. This one right here, I'll drop my camera for a moment, is Janna, and so this is the one region that has the most champions in the game, and they're all pretty solid. Teemo's a little bit weak right now, but all the rest, even at 3 stars, are pretty good champions. But if you're just starting off, I would still stick with Jinx. She's the first champion you get, so you're already going to have an advantage of where she is at. And at 3 stars, she's very simple. She's the starter beginner champion. So while some of these other champions can be very good and very fun, we're trying to give you the best choice that's going to save you the most amount of resources. And I think just sticking with Jinx to try to clear out some of those adventures is going to be very good for you. Leaving her at just your 3 stars is perfectly fine. This gives you a lot of passive damage for both the enemy nexus and enemy units, and then the super mega death rocket can be very good for you. Now, there's a lot of different builds you can actually go for with Jinx. I like going for the loose cannons payload. When I'm summoned, discard your hand, then create that many pow pows. This does a couple things for you. For one, it immediately levels up your Jinx, which then she creates a super mega death rocket when she's leveled, and then your 2-star also does this. You're just making 2 of these big rockets that are able to do a lot of damage to the enemy nexus, the enemy board, and overall this is a very powerful effect. This also triggers your 3rd-star powers, because every time you're discarding these cards, there's also damage to the enemy units and board as well. So loose cannons payload is it's the relic made for Jinx. It works out very well. Great to pick up. Now with this, you could throw on a Scourge Stash. Plunder, I cost 2 less. Again, every time you're playing a card, you're dealing damage to the enemy nexus, and Plunder activates when you damage the enemy nexus in a round. So it's going to be very easy to get this off. And so if you just want to make your Jinx a lot cheaper, put her on the board right away, this can be a pretty solid combo. You can go for 2 of them, so your Jinx is just completely free. But especially if you're just starting off, you're probably not going to have the double Scourge Stash. You could also throw out Ludens, making all your spells and skills deal that extra damage. damage. Since you're going to be using a lot of these pow pows and also these super mega death rockets that you're creating, a little bit of extra damage there can actually go quite a long ways. And then another relic you can go with is the Dreadway Chase Guns. When I'm summoned, create 2 warning shots in hand. This can be kind of fun to put in front of your payload, because when Jinx is then summoned, she makes these 2 warning shots. They then immediately get discarded by your payload, which then does more damage because you're 3-star discarding them, and then you get 2 more pow pows. So there's some flexibility with how you want to build your Jinx, but this is a example of a solid build, and you can mix and match and pair either multiple of these together. Overall though, Jinx is a very beginner friendly champion. That's why she's the first champion you get, and I think just through the tutorial you're pretty much able to get her to 2 stars anyways. And while you can further upgrade her through the constellation, you really don't need to. Just leaving her at 3 stars is perfectly fine. You'll be able to clear most, if not all, the content in the game. Now I will say some of these builds are a little bit more focused on the early game and stomping a lot of the easier challenges. If you're taking her just at 3 stars into some of the tougher challenges, you might actually want to throw on the duplicator, because this just really helps give you that extra damage to close out games, since once you get to that 6 mana gems, your spells are then doubled. So this can definitely help you out. All right, let's take a look at Shadow Isles now. We've kind of touched on this a couple times before. So first up, we had Morgana that we looked at with the Noxus region. Again, if you don't have the Starforged Gauntlets and Disciple of Shadows, those 2 epic relics, you probably don't want to go for him. Now Vex, we did talk about her a good amount with the Bandle City, and so if you're going that route, then you just can select Vex and be good to go. But if you don't want to go for Vex because you don't want to go and get that 4-star in the constellation, and you're just looking for 3-star champions, then I think going for either Gwen or Viego for the 3-star champion is going to be pretty good for you. First, let's talk about Gwen. For one, she has really good sustain because she has a drain effect, which means she heals your Nexus by dealing damage to the enemy Nexus. So she has really strong sustain, and she actually plays very similar to Alawi. So the most important relic on her is that Crown Guard Inheritance, and it pretty much works the exact same way. When you attack, you get a large amount of temporary stats, and so you attack once, you get all those stats, you normally level up with that attack, you then rally, you immediately attack again, doubling those temporary stats, and you're just able to absolutely end the game. So Crown Guard is definitely the most important. Now for Gwen, she doesn't have Overwhelm until you get her to 4 stars. So if you're trying to keep her just at 3 stars, you just want to throw on a Troll King's Crown. These 2 together is very important. The third one is a little bit more of a flex, but generally you want to throw on a Ludens. This is doubling the effect of your drain, and so this is just giving you a lot of extra damage as well as sustain. So this is very simple and straightforward, the pretty much best build you can go for with 3-star Gwen. Gwen is exceptionally good, and so if you want a Shadow Isles champion just at 3 stars, it's also very simple and easy to play, you probably want to go for Gwen. Now Viego is another one that is very good. You would like him to get into the 4 stars if you could, but you don't necessarily need to. Now he is more complicated to play than Gwen, but if you're wanting to play more of the dark, edgy Shadow Isles of killing your own unit, summoning ephemeral ghosts to try to tear apart your enemies, then Viego is going to be the better choice for you. For him, with your star powers, when you kill your own units or enemy units, you're summoning these encroaching mists. And these encroaching mists, every time you summon one, they're scaling up themselves and Viego. So they're just getting stronger and stronger and making your Viego stronger and stronger. It can be a very fun play style. And you have built in a bit of cost reduction. When ally with 4 more power dies, reduce the cost of all other 4 more power allies in hand by 1. Now your encroaching mists will very quickly get to the point where they're over that threshold, and so they're able to reduce down all of your bigger units. And so overall, Viego is pretty solid, and he can also scale incredibly well. So he's a champion that you could just keep at 3 stars, and especially the more you put into him after that, you're definitely going to get those upgrades. He's one of the best champions in the game. As far as relics to go with, Corrupted Star Fragment is great. Support, kill my support ally, grant me its keywords and stats. So this is able to do a lot for you. For one, this is able to trigger some of your mists, because you have a couple different effects that the first time an ally dies, or the first time you kill an ally, you're summoning an encroaching mist. So you're able to use this to trigger those effects to get more units. But then you're also summoning a lot of these units that are ephemeral, meaning they're going to die at the end of the round. So by killing those units and locking in those stats on Viego, you're kind of saving them because they would get lost at the end of the round. So Corrupted Star Fragment is really good for you. And then Stalker's Blade is another one that's excellent. When I'm summoned, I strike the weakest enemy. Normally Viego is going to be scaled up that he's going to kill whatever unit he's striking. And again, based on your star powers, when you kill an enemy unit, at least the first time in that round, you're summoning another one of those encroaching mists. So this is a great way to drop Viego, kill an enemy unit, and get another unit out of it. So Stalker's Blade is excellent for you. And then last up, if you don't have Viego at your 4 stars, you want to go for your Troll King's Crown. Allies have Overwhelm. This is very important for you. So if you just have a 3-star or under Viego, you definitely want to be running this. Now Viego's 4-star gives all your units that Overwhelm. So you can throw this out and go for a different relic, but until that point, this is very important for you. All right, only 2 regions left. Let's go for Shurima, and this one's probably gonna surprise, well, some of you. So we have both Kaisa and Talia here that are these 6-star champions, but they're both champions that they're only really good with very high investment. So when they're at their 6 stars, yeah, they're great. But until that point, they're not really the best. So I would actually go for Nidalee. Nidalee's incredibly good, even at just 2 stars. She is exceptionally strong, and she might take a little bit to get used to playing her. And when you look at her star powers, it doesn't necessarily look that insane. When ally transforms, grant it 1/1 in impact. When you get the attack token, create a clever camouflage in hand, lets you transform a follower. And the 3-star is definitely nice if you're pushing her into the tougher challenges. You will want this extra damage, but when you're going through anything like Aurelion Soul and below, honestly, just her at 2 stars is still strong enough to deal with it. But here, now the first time each round you transform a unit, you get a ephemeral copy of it, so you just get an extra unit that can then attack alongside you. With Nidalee and the build, there's a couple different options to go with. For one, you really want to play with the Lost Chapter. Play Refill Your Spell Mana. You pretty much always want to be using this because Nidalee has this ambush effect. So you're able to play her for just 2 mana, but she is disguised as this bush. Now, when you play her, you generate this spell that costs 2 mana in order to transform her from the bush into Nidalee. But the big thing here is you're now able to use spell mana to then summon your Nidalee. So you're still spending 4 mana overall, but what this does is you play Nidalee for just 2 mana with the Lost Chapter. So you play her, she refills your spell mana, so you have 3 spell mana then. Then you can spend that 2 mana on the ambush to play her round 1. So even though she's a pretty decent champion for 4 cost, being able to play her turn 1 is absolutely incredible. Now, as far as a build you want to go with, there's a couple different options. Again, Crown Guard is really good here when I level up Rally. Now, Nidalee's a champion that's actually able to level up and down multiple times. So you're getting more benefit from this from most champions. So when we level up, I've seen you summon or transform 4 other allies, especially in the mid game. You can have this happen pretty much almost every round. And then when she levels, she goes here, she gets bigger, she gets that overwhelm. And now when she hits the enemy Nexus, she is going to transform back into the smaller form of Nidalee, which you then can level her back up again. So you're able to trigger this rally multiple times, which means you can just keep leveling, rallying, and attacking to try to end the game very quickly. So Crown Guard is excellent, especially for a rare relic. Now you could pair this with Troll King's Crown to make sure Nidalee, when she's not leveled, has Overwhelm, and then all your other units have it as well. You'd also go for the Transmogulator support, transform my supported ally into a random follower that costs 3 more. So this is able to trigger your star powers and Nidalee's level up. It didn't when it first came out, but they did fix that. So this can be pretty good for you to try to level her up even faster, especially with Nidalee. If you have her at 3 stars, you can have her be the first unit you transform it around, and then you have 2 Nidalees. You can have each Nidalee supporting a separate target with this Transmogulator, and then those 2 targets are also going to transform, which is just going to help you level up even faster. So this is another great relic for you to consider. But you can also go for the Corrupted Star Fragment. Again, this is great when you have her at 3 stars, because then you're making these ephemeral units, and instead of just letting their stats just go away when that unit dies, you then can kill them yourself, lock in those stats on your permanent Nidalee, and just further help her scale up. All right, last up then we have the biggest region, Runeterra. This is actually one more than P and Z. So here you can see all the champions. We'll get rid of our camera for a moment so you can see Kayn. There are a lot of solid champions here, but again, some of them, especially some of these ones with the Constellation, definitely are better with higher investment. So Fiddlesticks is one of the best champions in the game, but he really hits that point with his 6-star. Now, he still can be solid with just his 3-star, but if we're just trying to consider 3-star champions, I think I would actually go with Evelynn. Now, for Evelynn, she's able to have a similar mechanic like Nidalee that we just talked about. She's able to level up and down multiple times in a match. So her, when I see you or an ally kill an allied husk, give me its positive keywords this round and I level up. She then transforms into this version of Evelynn when she gets that 5 power. And now at round end, summon a random husk if fewer than 6 allies have died this round, and transform me back into Evelynn. So she's able to level up and down. Now, it is determined on how many allies you have had die, but since she's able to level up and down so many times in a specific round, and from your star powers, every time you have a allied champion level, you're buffing up all of your allies everywhere by 2/2. So as you're leveling, all of your units everywhere are getting stronger. That includes your husks. So you might be wondering, what are these husks? So these are the cards that Evelynn is able to generate from herself and some of your other cards. So as you see, these all start with just the 1 health and then a keyword. And what happens is when you play an ally, kill me to grant my stats and positive keywords to that ally. So this is one of the main ways you're scaling up your units, especially because with Evelynn, every time she's leveling, she's buffing up all of your units everywhere by that 2/2 if you have her at 3 stars. that means the husks are also being buffed up. So you're playing your normal unit that's buffed. It's then killing these husks that also now have buff stats to make them even bigger. So while it says you're buffing up your units everywhere by 2-2, that's not really fully encompassing how much your units are going to get as far as stats, because they're already buffed and then they're taking these stats from these other buffed units. And so this is also how your Evelyn is leveling. When she sees one of these units dying around, she then levels and then continues on your scaling. Now, since she's able to level up so many times and potentially every single round, the build you want to go for her is Crown Guard, Deceiver's Crest, and Tempest Blade. So Crown Guard, when I level up Rally. So you're able to rally pretty much every single round, at least once she's on the board. And then also Tempest Blade, when I level up Stun all enemies. So you're not only rallying every round, which lets you attack again if you don't have the attack token, you're now stunning the entire enemy board, and so there's nothing they can do to try to stop you. And then you have Deceiver's Crest. When I level up, create a copy of my champion spell in hand. It costs 0 this round. Now for Evelyn, her champion spell is right here, Last Caress. Stop all enemy spells and skills targeting Evelyn. So this is a good way to try to protect her and make sure the enemy can't take her off the board. And then Evelyn strikes an enemy. So this is able to not only protect your Evelyn, it also gives you some removal. So maybe you level her up, you get a rally, you stun the entire enemy board, but then they drop a new unit and that unit's not stunned anymore. Well, you can use this Deceiver's Crest to then kill that unit with your Evelyn so they don't have any blockers, so you can just openly attack. So as far as 3-star Evelyn, without any epic relics, this is the best build for you to go for. Now, Evelyn will take a little bit to get used to, but she can be a very good champion, and especially just at 3 stars, I think she's probably the best out of all of the Runeterra champions. All right, that's it. Now, I know we didn't go into too much detail breaking down how exactly to play every single champion. We do have guide videos for every single champion up on the channel though. We also have build videos for everyone, so if you want to dive deeper into any of these, definitely check out the channel. I hope this was able to help you out. If it did, a like and subscribe is greatly appreciated, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.